My name is Mary Buschell, and I'm the director of Trails Edge Camp, which has been leasing the Fowler Center for the past this will be our 25th year. Trails Edge Camp is a one-week summer camp program for ventilator-dependent kids. These are extremely medically fragile kids who need some sort of life support device to breathe for them at some point of the day. Some kids require it 24 hours a day. Some kids only use it at night. But they're a very unique group of kids who are very limited in their normal experiences, childhood. They're really robbed of most normal childhood experiences, especially summer camp. We actually were the first. There were a lot of people who thought that it was kind of an insane idea and that it was way too risky a population to try to take away from their home settings for a week. And I'm happy to say now there have been more camps added to the list, and several other states also have a camp for this type of kid. Well, these kids, this is such an important week for them because they are so limited in their childhood experiences. They are a simple trip to McDonald's, because most of them use wheelchairs. They're very high tech. A lot of them have tracheostomies. They stand out wherever they go. When they come to the Fowler Center for that week, they are with true peers, and it's the only place they get to be with true peers. Add to that all the joy of summer camp: horseback riding, boating, fishing, skits, pranks, the talent show. If you add all that to the experience, it's a wonderful experience, and it's one that the kids look forward to every year. They actually start counting down the days when they leave here as to when they'll be coming back again.
Wow.
Well, the camp serves, it's ironic, when we first started camp, we were doing it for families. I met families at the hospital who were parents of vent-dependent kids, and their stress level was off the Richter scale. They have a divorce rate of 80%. And so when we first started talking about camp, we really targeted the parents. It was like, let's give these folks a rest. We'll entertain the kids. They'll know they're safe. They'll know they're having a good time, and they can get a break. And that was really from a support group that we had started. That was the message. We need a break. We need a break. There's never a break. There's no vacation. And that was our number one goal. And it ended up being so much more. I don't think I really understood what camp was until I started doing it with this population of kids. And then I started to realize that now 25 years later, I see a kid who comes for the first time, and I see the kid who leaves. And in a week, they're different. In a week, they've learned independence. In a week, they have learned self-esteem. And they've learned that they have friends out there. They've learned that they're not alone. They can tell their high school story or their bad experience they had sometime in their life. They can share that with kids who know what they're talking about, who share those same experiences. So we started to realize the impact on the campers. This was about the same time we started to appreciate the impact on the volunteers. We're completely staffed by volunteers, and to be honest with you, we started out thinking this will be a really good thing. We're going to be exhausted, but it's a really good thing, and boy, great for us. This is wonderful. And then came the last day of the first year of our camp, and I realized the person who got the most out of camp was me. I became barrier-free. I spent a week with those kids, and the kid who showed up as a vent-dependent kid who had a spinal cord injury went home as a 12-year-old girl, or a 16-year-old boy, or a 7-year-old. They went home as kids. And that was a huge breakthrough for me as a medical professional. And every other volunteer experienced the same thing. And we see that happening year after year after year. In the beginning, I'd be very modest at orientation, and I would say, this has the potential to change your life. And I felt really nervous that that was overstating it, that was. And now I don't hesitate. When we do orientation, I say, without a question, to every volunteer, you will leave this camp a different person. It may not be for you. It's hard. It's no sleep. It's walking. It's being in crowded spaces. It's losing your personal space. It's doing a lot of things you never thought you would do. But when you leave, you will be different. We have an 80% return rate on all of our volunteers. It's amazing. More than half of our volunteers have been coming for more than 10 years. It's been a life-changing event. They now have families. Their families know that the week of June is set aside and it's for somebody else. And so it's just been this beautiful trifold event that has changed so many lives. And it's way beyond what we expect. I mean, camp, I get. A lot of people don't. And you have to come here. You have to come to the Fowler Center. You have to see their programs. You have to see the difference that it makes in people. And then you get camp. It's not just a place where you sleep for a week in the woods and you learn how to make campfires. When we started making the plans for camp, there were 3 issues that we were faced with, first of all. And the first was, would the medical center support the idea? Would the legal department back everybody? We were looking at all healthcare professionals as volunteers. Would their licenses be covered in the event that something horrible would happen? That was easy. The head attorney, Ed Goldman, was just so excited about the project. He's like, whatever you need, we're behind you. That was easy. The second thing was funding. Well, we were clueless about funding, which was that was probably the classic ignorance is bliss, because we had so many people say, oh, you're going to get money from everywhere. And the third thing, probably the most challenging, was finding a place that would meet our kids' needs. Barrier-free for this group of kids is a different barrier-free. Kids who have spinal cord injuries, their chairs with all of their equipment on it and the batteries weigh over 300 pounds. So a kind of rough, sandy path that a manual wheelchair or a smaller, lighter weight wheelchair can get through is impossible for a kid. If you think you have a 16-year-old with a spinal cord injury, in a 300, you've got almost 500 pounds of weight. So that was huge. And so one of the people that was instrumental in the planning, Bob Remenap is his name. He was instrumental. He says, there's a place in the Thumb called the Fowler Center. I've been there once for a conference. I think it'd be perfect. We came here and we never looked again. It was the first and last place we ever looked. And it's been our home now for 25 years. This will be our 25th anniversary coming up.
Wow.
And it is barrier-free to everyone. Barrier-free is that if one person can do something, everybody can do something. There was beauty in the design of the camp. And Jack Fowler clearly was such a visionary. Barrier-free to him was that the person in the wheelchair doesn't go through one door around back by the service entrance and the person walking goes up the steps. Barrier-free means everybody goes through the door the same way. The zero threshold of every building here was remarkable, and it was the first thing that overwhelmed me. So there's the physical barrier-free. And then in our camp, we wanted to design everything to be emotionally barrier-free. So if there's a horseback riding program, everybody who wants to ride a horse will be encouraged and be able to ride a horse. There's a great story, I think, that when the Fowler Center, and I think you were instrumental, Steve, in purchasing the 100-acre farm over here, when that farm was first purchased, there had been no time to do any renovations, and there was this beautiful hip roof barn, which of course still stands, but it had been in real farm use and not taken care of. There was no way to get anybody in a wheelchair, or we thought at the time that we could get anybody in a wheelchair, so seeing the barn was not going to be part of our plan. We went over there one day, and we had this very brilliant camper who was a poet and an artist, completely wheelchair bound, and he was going blind. His disease is tragic. It's a terminal illness. He was losing his vision, and he was already quite deaf and communicated with a writing board. And he kept writing the barn, the barn, the barn. He wanted to go to the barn. And the volunteers who come to camp have this barrier-free mentality that you can make it happen. And we got enough people to pick up his wheelchair, and we cleared what we could, picked up his wheelchair, carried it over the obstacles, and we got him inside of the barn. And there was sunlight coming through, and I'm a barn person, I'm a horse person, so I love barns. And the sunlight was coming through the roof, and it was highlighting all of the dust, so it just looked like gold specks just floating through there. And he got in there, and he just went, and he motioned like this. He wanted to be, so we all just stepped back. One of the challenges of being an event-dependent person is that you can never be left alone, because if you become disconnected and you're unable to reconnect yourself, or if it's at a connection we can't reach, it's life support. It's game over. And so we couldn't leave him alone in the barn, but we could all step back and let the artist in him sit and just watch through, and he saw something that I think I related to because of my love of barns, but I think a lot of people wouldn't. But it's that barrier-free. A kid wants to do it, this is the place for them to do it. This is the can-do camp. And that's our attitude, is all the volunteers come here and they're barrier-free. And to lift him in there, it was worth it. That was worth every moment. And I'll never forget that memory, and I don't think he will either.
Mm-hmm.
I remember meeting Jack the first June we came up here. It was the first week. Of course, I had heard all about him, because by now I had sort of researched the Fowler Center, because I was just so amazed by this facility and his vision. This was 1989, and I kept saying, my God, this place was built in 1974? How did he know? How did he know? And so I was really looking forward to the fact that he might be coming. And of course, Big Al was the director then. And Jack came up, and Jack would do this. I know you've seen him do this moment, and it was just so amazing. And he was so excited to know that he never knew this population existed. And to know that he had designed this place so perfect for our kids. And of course the kids were just, for them to get on the asphalt trails and power chairs, they can't drive their chairs. A lot of our kids, unfortunately, can't even drive their chair in their home. Now, their chair is their everything. It's their body. And for them to get up here on these asphalt trails, I mean, you've seen them, Steve. They go as fast as the chair. In fact, some of the kids, we have to actually turn them down because they just go as fast as they possibly can. And we have an annual wheelchair race now, which is a tradition, and it's very competitive. Kids practice for it. So for him to see that he built this wonderland, if it was nothing more than the asphalt trails, it was a wonderland, and it was so exciting. And the whole thing, to meet him and have him say to me, you're doing such a good job. I mean, that has always been humbling, and I don't think I will live long enough to be on his level, but I am so privileged to have met him and to walk in his shadow and to stay at Jack's house, to be able to come every year to what I think of as my week of June home, where I'm here in this magical place. And You know, he's changed my life forever. I'm one of the many tens of thousands of people that are a Jack groupie, and I always will be. We talked about a lot of things. What I loved listening to the most was the fact that, you know, when he grew up with his disability, and his dad was so involved in camping. I mean, his dad was a visionary in his own right, and that Jack just was able to go to camp and do what he could do. And he never resented, you know, he said he loved laying on the lake bank and watching the boys swim. He's never been able to swim, but he loved that. And, you know, so I loved hearing those stories. I loved, you know, he raised, I don't know the number, I might be misquoting the number, but it seemed like it was in 1954 he raised something crazy like $656,000. $656,000 back then? Are you kidding me? And I would ask him about it, and he'd just shrug his shoulders in that Jack way, and it came in, we needed to do it, and it came in, and, you know, I mean, it was just wonderful. Asking him, and we've had, you know, a couple rough periods where I was able to go to him, you know, and say, what do you do? What do you do with this? And it was always to simplify. I think I tended, you know, obviously if anybody lived their life again, they would do things differently, and I think I would get so stressed out about one thing, and it would become bigger to me. And he always, you know, we'd gone to lunch sometimes, and we'd talk about it, and he would always be just, get it simple. And it'll be that you're making it too big. You're making it too big. And, you know, knowing what he dealt with. You know, mine is a 1-week program. And this is a man who's, you know, in charge of so much. And, you know, to be able to get advice from him, it's just amazing. We're going to continue. Our next move is to just reinforce our partnership with the Fowler Center. I think losing Jack, I have felt him on a few occasions in my life. I consider myself a spiritual person, but not a religious person. And I have had events, many events involved in camp, many. I always, from the very beginning, felt like I was driven by an external force. You know, when you know you're taking on a project that is going to have a lot of complications. And I've had a lot of spiritual events where I felt like I was being driven. And I had it with the beginning of camp, and I had it with the treehouse on many occasions. And people can believe that or not. You know, you either are or you aren't a believer in that sort of thing. But I really feel that Jack would like to see a stronger partnership with Trails Edge Camp. I think he would like to see the bond be more than us just leasing a week. And so now what we would like to do is make some much needed changes to the facility in order for more growth. And I think they're changes that he would be very happy with. The first one will be the ACE project, which is the activity center expansion. Wow, it's such a big word for me. So the ACE project, to expand the activity center, it's really been needed for a very long time. When you were the director here, we needed it. We talked about building a new one, and I think that that's the big one. And I think if we form a partnership, it will make it easier. I think funding will be easier. I think getting volunteer crews to come in and contribute, if not all the labor, great amounts of the labor, I think that would be great. There are so many other things we need. This camp, we cannot let Jack's legacy go down. There's no way, when there's breath in my body, that I could see that happen. And this, to me, is the best way I know of, is to make this permanent connection with Trails Edge Camp. Our campers end up getting a lot of high-profile because of their extraordinary circumstances, they're a very high profile group of kids. We're standing here next to the Craig Van Lannen Treehouse, which was a project that actually came about in 1999. One of the instrumental people, there were really, I'm considered the founder now, and the truth of the matter is there were about 8 of us that just worked so hard on getting the first camp off the ground. And one of them was a young man named Craig Van Lannen. He was a very close friend of mine. He was a respiratory therapist as well. And he passed away with cystic fibrosis in 1999. And his request was that all money, instead of flowers, in lieu of flowers and anything else, that the money would come to Trail's Edge. And we received $15,000, which seemed like a lot of money, but it was amazing because we got checks from all over the United States. He was very involved in the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, so we received a lot of money. And we kept trying, we put the money in an account, and we were trying to think of something really wild and crazy to do, because that's how he was. He was wild and crazy. He was over the top all the time. And a very unique person. So we wanted something unique. Well, in 2002, we tried tree climbing for the first time, which is it's recreational tree climbing, and it's actually a sport, and it's using ropes and harnesses. Bob Remenap, another one of the founders, was able to rig up a addition to the setup so that even kids with no head control, completely ventilator dependent, could go up in the tree. Well, it was so successful. It was amazing. In the 2 days that we did tree climbing that year, it was cold and rainy, but the kids didn't want to come out of the tree. It was just amazing. At that time, Tom Hussman was the director, and Jack Fowler actually came that year. And of course, Jack saw it. He'd never even walked up to the activity center. He just stopped at the tree and got in line. And, Jack was up there in the tree too. It was just it was just amazing how successful it was. So when we got all done with camp and I was getting ready to leave, Tom Hussman said to me, what you need is a tree house. And it was actually his idea. And I'm like, that's it. We have $15,000. How much could it cost? Well, we started the project. I called the School of Architecture at U of M. And at that time, I thought I could get a grad student who might be interested. I ended up getting a brilliant architect named Christina Sinnes, and she was teaching there, and she actually came out to the Fowler Center in August of 2002. Camp was in June. August we came out. We found the site and started planning. She wrote a class, a 600 class for grad students, and she had 2 grad students working on it with her. They did all the designs. She brought in a brilliant engineer from the School of Engineering, Peter von Bulow, and he started working on it. Huck Harrington, one of the respiratory therapists at the hospital, who's a licensed builder as well, he jumped on board, loved it. He's been a camp volunteer since the beginning. So we started to acquire all of these people who were like, oh my God, this is great, this is great. Because if you're crazy enough to take ventilator-dependent kids to camp for a week, you're crazy enough to think that you could build a treehouse for them. So all the crazies just got fired up by this. And we started building in October of 2002, and it was completed in 2004. Our goal was much different. Our goal was that it would take a year, and it would take about $40,000, and of course it cost $89,000 and took 2 years, but it's pretty remarkable, and a lot of people have been up in it and have had a wonderful time. We wanted everybody to go into the tree the same way, and the idea was tree climbing, which is when we introduced Dick Flowers, who would become my future husband, unbeknownst to me at the time. He's considered one of North American experts on recreational tree climbing. He was a former rock climber and a real adventure outdoorsman, and the idea was that he would come and at least give us some ideas, because the kids love tree climbing so much, and the harness lifts the kids out of their wheelchairs. And it changed their perspective. When you analyze what was so great about it, you realize that if you sit in a wheelchair your whole life, you are looking up. You are looking up. You are looking, everyone is above you. And when you take them out of the tree, up into the tree, they're not only up there where all kids love to be, and even adults, but they're looking down on stuff, and their wheelchair's below them, and they're not a part of that wheelchair. And for a time, they're no different than anyone else. So we wanted to design the treehouse with that attitude, with that idea. And of course, Christina was just enamored with the whole idea. And when Dick came up and introduced tree climbing to everyone who hadn't, he got caught up in the whole design idea and signed on as one of the crazies that just said he'd see this thing through. And it's a one of a kind engineering feat. It's won a bunch of engineering awards, but more than that, kids have had so much fun. And I wish you could go inside it and see, because it's complete graffiti in there, all by the kids. And there's a lot of girls rule and boys drool, and girls drool and boys, girls, yeah, it's just great. There's all kinds of messages, and those are starting to accumulate in there, and it's pretty much covered all the walls with the normal treehouse stuff that kids do, that there's no way these kids could ever do that. It's so difficult to know what'll happen in 25 years. I hope that most of the kids with spinal cord injuries don't use wheelchairs. I hope to live to see that day, and I honestly, in my heart, I believe we will see that day. I believe there will be other things that will require people use wheelchairs and ventilators and in medical technology. The amount of advances we have seen in home mechanical ventilation, in wheelchair technology, one of the benefits we didn't even talk about, we talked about the volunteers, the kids, and the families. For technology, for rehab technology, huge breakthroughs have been made at this camp during our week. We have 2 inventors who've been coming for over 5 years. What used to be a 25-pound battery that powered the wheelchair, next to a 7-pound battery that powered the ventilator, next to a 1-pound battery that powered the suction machine, is now a less than 5-pound battery that does it all. This is a showcase. We don't let it be science. Don't make a mistake that this is a science lab where kids are put under a microscope, because they're not. And that is the one thing we absolutely draw the line on. If you want to come and be interactive with these kids, if you want to help them, if you want to make their life better, you come as a volunteer, and you come for the whole week, and you're going to have a job. You're not just going to be Mr. Inventor walking around taking notes. You have to be part of the camp. You have to fit in. And the kids are more than into that. They're into technology like you wouldn't believe. And so when you get a guy like Bob Rossi, one of our inventors, who loves the kids, much to my chagrin, my least favorite invention to come here is a crossbow that can be totally triggered off of a kid's mouth stick. A kid who cannot even lift a finger or breathe a breath on his own can shoot a real live crossbow and put it through the bale of straw down at the archery range. Who am I to say this camp is for everyone? And as long as it's safe, we can do it. So this kind of stuff is just here. So to say what's going to happen in 25 years, I can't imagine. It's just exciting, but it's exciting and it makes you want to be here for it. I think it's what gave Jack 93 years. He wanted to be here to keep this legacy going and to see how much more we could do for people with disabilities, how much better we could make them feel. And, I think that kind of thing keeps you going. It's sad that Jack couldn't meet everyone who might be interested in a project out here, but if you just Google him and look at the awards he's won, and then if you don't even count the physical disabilities that he faced every day, if he had everything working perfectly to accomplish what he's accomplished in a lifetime, would be amazing. But then add his challenges with speech and ambulation, and you just have to go, wow.